पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तरं दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good. And may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we'll start with verse 3 this time. Last week we saw the first two verses of this last section of the Upanishad. The primary idea that is being emphasized here is that without the presence of the divine, no material function can occur. So all the world around us, the material universe around us, it seems to follow some law, some pattern. And I think science has done a very good job of trying to discover the patterns that occur in all the processes around us and see that there is some kind of a logic involved. And this is what we call laws. Call it gravitation or the different laws in physical sciences. And what these earlier verses that we studied last week pointed out was that while all of these laws seem to function the way they should, they would not if it were not for the presence of the Spirit behind. It is like all of the different gadgets we might have, whether it's for cooking or for light or for temperature control, all requiring electric power to run them. Now, all of these gadgets are great. They can do their function very well. But if there is a power outage, then none of these gadgets will work. So they, just as these gadgets which depend on electricity will not work when there is no power, the entire material universe will not work, will not be able to do anything if there is no presence of the divine. And that divine is really consciousness. So if we must divide our complete experience of life, it can be done with simply the experience of matter or the material universe and the experience of spirit. And what this section is pointing out is that the material universe that we encounter is completely dependent on the spirit. And the spirit here is consciousness. Consciousness is the only non-material thing, if you want to call it a thing, in the Vedantic worldview. And this is one of the key concepts that every Vedanta student has to just get it right. Because if we get this idea of consciousness right, other things fall into place more easily. And the difficulty with getting it right is because the word consciousness is used so often, and it is already been viewed, at least in material science, as something that occurs in the course of evolution. And you would have seen the different ways the theory of evolution gets explained. That at some stage, consciousness appeared. Related to that is the idea that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain function. That is something that happens inside the brain. Now that is one view, and that is the view most of us are influenced by, directly or indirectly, whenever the word consciousness or the idea of consciousness comes up. And that way of thinking is sometimes a hurdle in understanding how that word consciousness is used in Vedanta. It's a little bit like our understanding of light. Now, those who are studying physics or from a purely scientific point of view might have a better insight into what light is. But for a layperson, light is something that illumines things. And we might say, well, of course we can see light because it is the help of light we are able to see everything. But if you come to think of it, light as it is seen in science, our eyes cannot see light. That level of frequency, our eyes are incapable of seeing. What we are really seeing are objects illumined by light. And when we see objects illumined by light, we infer, well, there must be light here. Although we don't think that the presence of light is inferred, we think we are seeing light. Actually, we are seeing objects illumined by light. Light itself is not seen. Somewhat similar is the idea with consciousness, that we are conscious of objects. I'm conscious of the chair, I'm conscious of a table, I'm conscious of the world outside, and therefore I know there is consciousness. Now, just as light does not depend on objects for its existence, even if there were no objects to illumine, light would still exist. Now, it is all in a relative sense. Light would still have its identity even if there is nothing to illuminate. And if there is nothing to illuminate, we wouldn't even know whether there is light. For that matter, what is night? Night, we might think, oh, there is no light. But actually, light is there. There's no objects to illumine the light. And that's why, I mean, if you go into space, and people have gone up in the farther reaches of space. So what we are really seeing if at all we see, are some astronomical bodies. But in between, the space between, if there is nothing to illuminate, it's just going to appear dark, which doesn't mean that the light energy isn't there. So all this is a way to say that in the Vedantic worldview, we need to understand consciousness in a similar way. While consciousness is helpful for us to see and become aware of objects around us, because without consciousness we wouldn't be aware of anything. But consciousness itself does not depend on the presence of objects, just like light doesn't depend for its existence on objects. So an objectless consciousness, or a consciousness that can stand by itself, that is the kind of consciousness on which the entire material universe depends. In a general sort of way, we can understand why that dependence is. It is a little bit like when the sun rises in the morning. As far as I am concerned, if I am asleep, until I wake up, and waking up really means nothing but being conscious of the world around me. That's essentially what waking up is. So, if I'm not conscious of the sun rising, I'm still in darkness. The light of the sun is non-existent for me unless and until I become aware of it. So the sun may be shining very brightly outside, but that light of the sun is totally dependent on my being aware of it, because if I'm not aware of it, the sun doesn't even exist for me. And so this is a very important point. The existence of anything depends on my awareness of it. Now, one of the hurdles in that way of thinking is our present idea that there are many of us, that I may not be aware of something, but it's like this. I may be asleep, but maybe my friend is awake. And so I cannot say that the sun is dependent on my being aware of it, because the sun is still there. I cannot say the sun doesn't exist because my friend who is awake is noticing the sun. There is a fallacy in this, because even my friend who is noticing the sun is dependent. The existence of my friend who is noticing the sun is dependent on my being conscious of that friend. Now, this is sometimes very terrifying. What it really means is, it's not just about the sun. Everything else, everything in this universe, other than me, depends on my awareness. Just as everything in your dream world, the entire dream world with all its mountains and rivers and people and animals, including your little self you see in your dream world, is dependent on me who is asleep and dreaming it. When I wake up, I'm no longer aware of the dream world. And when I wake up, the dream world vanishes, completely vanishes. All the people, the entire world vanishes. So that whole, just as the dream world is dependent upon my being aware of it, in other words, the dream world exists only as long as I'm dreaming, the waking world exists as long as I'm awake. This is the logical step, but there is a resistance to it. We can kind of accept the dream exists as long as I'm aware of it. But one way ignorance kind of caught hold of our heart is that we cannot accept that waking world exists only as long as I'm aware of it. So to cut the long story short, it really means if there is one kind of dream I see when I sleep, there is another kind of dream I see when I wake up. Death is another kind of dream. If people speak about going to heaven or hell, that is another kind of dream. Hell is a dream, or heaven is a dream. Rebirth or reincarnation is a dream. It's an endless series of dreams, one after another, that we are passing through. And these dreams will not end unless and until I wake up. And that is what the word Buddha means. Buddha means one who has woken up. So while we might, in relative sense, speak about the three states of waking, dream, and deep sleep, from this higher perspective, waking dream, dream, deep sleep dream, they are all just dreams. And the goal is to wake up, not just from the dreams that we have at night, but from these dreams that never seem to end. So that's the kind of a background we need to keep as we read these verses. So let's look at verse 3. Bhayadasya agnistapati, bhayat tapati suryaha, bhayatindrascha vayuscha, mrutyurdhavati panchamaha. For fear of him the fire burns, for fear of him shines the sun, for fear of him do Indra, Vayu, and Death, the fifth, proceed with their respective functions. So all of these cosmic functions that occur, the names here, Indra, Vayu, and Death. Now Indra, Vayu, and Death is actually what Yama, the teacher here, who is in charge of that function. So all of these cosmic functions, when they are deified or when they are seen as being controlled by the spirit, consciousness, then this personification of these different powers that control these cosmic functions are given these different names. So all these Vedic deities of Indra, Varuna, and so on are not the names of some people. They're just the personification of the consciousness identified with a certain function. As every material function cannot occur unless and until there is some kind of a conscious presence there. Just like no electric gadget can function unless and until there is the electric power behind it. So keep that analogy at the back of your mind. So everything that happens in this universe, so for fear of him really means they all obey the presence of the spirit. If the spirit were not there, they won't be able to do anything. It's only fear in that sense. Verse 4. Iha chet ashakat bodhum praksharirasya visrasaha tatas sargeshu lokeshu sharirattvaya kalpate. If one is able to realize that Brahman here, before the fall of the body, one becomes free from the bondage of the world. If not, one has to take body again in the worlds of creation. And this is clear to most of us who have been studying Vedanta for some time, that if we can recognize, first of all, this distinction between material universe and consciousness, and then to know what is my relationship with consciousness. The way as I am now, I seem to be a combination of two things. In my personality, there are material parts. The body and mind are material. And the spirit is the other. So there is spirit and matter in me right now. So a Vedanta practice involves looking at these material parts of me, the body and mind, and saying, this body is a part of this material universe. Just like these atoms, the table and chair, everything has atoms and molecules, this body also has atoms and molecules. I don't look at this table and say, this is me. Why do I look at this and say, this is me? When there is really no difference. As far as we even know the chemical composition of the human body. And even if we kind of take another one lump of matter with a similar chemical composition, we would not call it a body. The only difference is really, this seems to be animated with life. And so then we go, well, there is something else within me. There is this mind and intellect and so on. But all of these are changeable. All of these follow material laws. And beyond that is the spirit. So first of all, not only do I recognize the distinction between matter and spirit in an abstract sense, or just in the world outside, but internally, that there is this material part of me and then there is the spiritual part of me. And then the question is, which of these is the real me? If I disown the body and mind and say, this is not me, this is not me, have I somehow become less than who I was? Because if my personality threefold, body, mind, and spirit, and I'm now saying I'm not the body and mind, have I just become 1/3 of who I was? And what Vedanta says is, on the contrary, only when I'm able to look at the body and mind and say, this is not the real me, then not only have I not become less than who I was, only then actually I attain to the fullness of who I really am. In other words, at present, I have made myself small. What has made me small is being limited to this body and mind. Let's go back to the dream. So, all of us dream, and the dreams that we see are our own personal creation. For the time being, forget this creation made by God or whenever or wherever. Just think about my own personal creation of the dream every night. No two of people can dream in the same way. One of the arguments that people have is, well, all of us are experiencing the same world. But as far as dreams are concerned, we all have our own personal dreams. Now, in that dream, we see many people. We see animals, people, mountains, trees. And all the people in our dream are experiencing the same dream. Although, all of those people are my creation. And I identify as one person in that dream as me. And I say, well, that's me. So next day, when I'm narrating my dream to somebody, I really say, in my dream, I went there, I went to this place, I went to that place. What has really happened? There is one person in my dream has gone someplace, and I have identified with that person and said, that was me, and this is what I have seen. Now, really, the entire dream is my creation. I am really the creator of that whole dream, and I have made myself smaller enough to identify with just one smaller part of that dream. That is what has happened. So just as we are infinite, but we have now narrowed down my existence to just this one body and mind. So in fact, when we are able to look at our body and mind and say, I am more than this, my existence is not limited to the existence of the body and mind. So I'm not really becoming 1/3 of who I was. Only then actually I'm attaining to the real fullness of myself. So that is the idea here. So what this verse points out is, if one is able to realize Brahman here, and realizing Brahman here means realizing that this material part of me, the body and mind, are just coverings. And then the spirit, which is not limited by the body and mind, that's who I am. That is the meaning of realizing Brahman. And if that happens before the fall of this body, then we become free from all the bondage of the world. Although we use the word world all the time, there are many different ways of defining what the world is. But one way which is very helpful is the world is really just nothing but my body and mind. That is the world. Because the world that I experience is a world experienced through the body and through the mind. If the body and the mind are absent, even for a short time, the world vanishes, as in deep sleep. So, for any world to be experienced, there has to be a body and mind. Even the dream world that is experienced, there is a body and mind of some little my dream me who is experiencing the dream world. And so, becoming free from the bondage of the body and mind, which is really what the world is, one then doesn't have to come back again. Because you're not going anywhere. Because only if you go somewhere there is a question about coming back. But if you're not going anywhere, you're already everywhere. And if you're everywhere, you don't go anywhere. And that's the thing. It's so long as I'm limited, I can go from one place to another, whether it is heaven, hell, or Brahmaloka, Suryaloka, any number of lokas you can go to, provided I am a limited entity. In order for me to go from point A to point B, there are two things absolutely necessary. First of all, for me to go from A to B, I should be at A, and I should not be at B. Because if I'm already at B, then I cannot go from A to B. Now, if I'm infinite, I'm everywhere. If I'm everywhere, I cannot go anywhere. And that's the idea. So therefore, once we know we are Brahman, we are infinite, then there is no rebirth, there is nothing. But if not, one has to take the body again in the worlds of creation. If I have not realized it, then we have to come back again. One question, how do I know? How do I know whether there is rebirth or not? And the honest answer is, I do not know. So this is a way of thinking. The idea is, if I remain limited, and if I die, I will have to take another body, come back again, and keep on in this circle. This is a worldview. There is no proof for it. But this is a way our mind is trying to make sense of this strange place in which we suddenly find ourselves. We have just landed nobody seems to have asked us, like, do you want to be born? Or where do you want to be born? We don't know anything. We were born, and when we were little, of course, we didn't have any questions. We didn't have anything. Then as we grow older, then we begin to ask, what is the meaning of all this? What does it have any purpose? From where have I come? Where will I go? Now, when these questions come in the heart, we need answers. And so one way of answering that question is what is being presented here. One way is, as long as I remain limited, as long as my identity remains confined, I will have to keep on coming in different finite forms. Once this bondage is removed, once I know the truth, I don't have to come again. As I said, this is the theory. Rebirth and reincarnation is as much a theory as one birth. Because there is no proof for one birth either. And so neither of these things, in other words, let me put it just this way. What happens after death? No one knows. In India, in Marathi language, there is one saying which says, Swata melya shivay swarga disat nahi, which means that while we may talk about heaven and read about it, some may believe it, some may not believe it, but the truth is, whether there is heaven or not, I have to die myself to find it out. Other than that, just believe it or not believe it. So anything after death, we just have to find out for ourselves. But before that, we still like to speculate. I mean, think about it this way. Why would people want to know about the future? All these people who can tell their future. Sometimes people read the lines on your palmistry and astrology and crystal gazing. All that we need to say is, well, just live a little longer. You will see what is in your future. But we still want to know in advance what might happen. There is curiosity. So there is curiosity about what happens after death. And so one way of thinking is what is being presented here. Another way of thinking is there is this one life. You have been created, and then what happens after death will determine how you live here. If you do it right, you go to heaven and live eternally. If you do it wrong, you suffer eternally in hell. Then that's a different theory. And one, not this theory is better than that, or any, they're just two different theories. Now, we can see whichever of these explanations that have risen in the human mind resonates with us. It's possible that some people might appreciate one theory more than another. And how do we know what is really there? How do we know what really happens after death? We will know soon. Hopefully not too soon, but we will all know. That's the idea. So there is no need to be dogmatic about these matters. It's just to recognize that these are different theories. These are just theories to help us make sense of the world in which we are. And so in that light, the next verse can be read. Verse 5. Yatha darshe tathatmani, yatha swapne tatha pitraloke, yathapsu pariva dadrishe, tatha gandharvaloke, chaya tapayoriva brahmaloke. Brahman is seen in the self as one sees oneself in the mirror, in the world of mains as one perceives oneself in dream, in the world of Gandharvas as one's reflection is seen in the water, in the world of Brahma as light and shade. Now there is a big footnote here, you can take a look at it later. What this simply means is the different planes of existence that are sometimes described in books. So here in the self, it doesn't mean the Atman here. Brahman is seen in the self. It means our present awareness in the intellect. The way we see the world now is pretty clear. I mean, just as if I were to hold a mirror and see what is outside, and when I see with my eyes, it just looks as if the clarity of the world that I see matches the clarity if I were to see the world in a mirror. That's essentially what the first line means. In the world of mains, pitraloke, so mains, so again, there are many different theories. There is nothing very definitive about it since it's all speculation. So sometimes the books make a distinction between, there is a plane of existence where people go after death. So this is again a question like, where do people go after they die? And so the idea is, most people whose lives are a mixed bag. There is some good that is done, something not so good. So most people will go to this Pitraloka, where the departed ancestors or departed spirits are. And this realm of Pitraloka or mains is sometimes distinguished from what is called Devaloka, which is, if we must put a value to it, you might say, well, that's a little bit of a higher plane of existence. where people who are exceptionally good, who have a lot more good and lot more positives and a lot less negatives, get to a little bit better place. And so that is what the world of mains is. So there one sees oneself as in a dream. Now, I don't know whether any of us are able to make that distinction, but it is often said that, and you tell me what is your experience about it. It's often said that the dreams, the light, the source of light for the dreams is really our mind. There is no sun or anything as we see it now. And so sometimes people have said that the dreams, the lighting in our dreams is not, relatively speaking, not as bright as the lighting, that the brightest light we can have in the waking state. I don't know if that's real. I don't know if that's true. But sometimes people say that somehow there is a greater clarity and more light in the waking state than in the dream state. Again, don't take this as some kind of a definitive statement. This is just one belief. And so the idea is, as we go into these different planes of existence, the clarity might not be same. So in the Pitraloka, you'll see it as if in a dream. Now, Gandharvas is again a different class of existence, a different plane of existence. Gandharvas are often described in Indian mythology as usually those who do it more with music and art and all of that. And so apparently there is some plane existence dedicated to them. So there one sees oneself, one's reflection as seen in a water, so the clarity is even further less. In the world of Brahma, which is oftentimes in most books, this Brahmaloka, it's as different from Brahman. Brahman doesn't have any loka. This one is the Brahma, the one of the Hindu trinity, one who the creative function of the divine is called Brahma. Now, Brahmaloka is often considered like the highest realm, like the 5-star or 7-star of these celestial realms. And so there you see it much, much clearer, even clearer than here. Just as we can distinguish light and darkness so clearly. So, and people with exceptional goodness, exceptional purity, go to that highest realm of Brahmaloka. And there their clarity is much greater. Again, how do we know it? Well, this is what the book says. The Upanishad doesn't insist that you have to believe it, but this is the way it is described. The idea is not to create, again, a doctrine or dogma out of it. The idea is to show that in different material planes, what we see might be different. The more important thing is that which is perceived may be different, but the perceiver remains unchanged. So the object of perception will change, but the one who is seeing remains constant. And Swami Vivekananda once wrote in a letter that we Vedantists must learn to look at everything from the subjective standpoint. And therefore, while what happens in the external world gets described in many different ways in the book, the focus ultimately just goes at who is the one who is perceiving it. So that's of critical importance in all this study. So we'll stop here today. If you have any ideas, thoughts, questions, feel free to ask.
Swamiji, the final conclusion of the Upanishads is that Brahman alone is real, everything else is unreal. So why all these stories about planes of existences and even karma? That's again a part of just something which is not there. At the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
It's everything is changing. Our bodies and minds are changing. Our thoughts are changing. So the Kathopanishad could have just said that, all this is, not, and Brahman alone is.
Yes, it could have just been just a small handout instead of a book. You're right. The problem is, now that we are sitting here and talking all this for the last half an hour or 45 minutes, all of this seems to like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But the moment you step out, go out onto the road and start driving, you are not going to remember that all this is really not there. And if we just see that 99% of most people, it's around 99.9% of the time, they move about through their life as if all this has an objective reality. And that's why you need all these stories to put it into context. And the idea is not to make us believe that all these different planes of existence are actually there. The idea is the one who is perceiving them is the only reality. And so that which is perceived, the Upanishad can simply say, all this is not real. Okay, then what? That doesn't solve our problem. And so the Upanishad, just like, it's a little bit like when to little babies we are teaching simple math, addition. And you say, 2 plus 2 is 4. It would make no sense to a baby. Because it's so abstract, like numbers, what is 2 plus 2 is equals 4? And then if you actually take 2 mangoes, and then take 2 more mangoes and keep them side by side and say, now there were only 2 mangoes, now I put 2 mangoes here. Just count in 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it seems to make sense. So just as in our infancy, we need to make things more tangible in order for us to be able to grasp something that is more abstract. So all of these different planes of existence, rebirth, karma, all of these things are abstract enough, but at least they make something a little bit more tangible than simply to say, all this doesn't exist, because it wouldn't help. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Swamiji, what is the root of the word Brahman, or the Brahma, the root word? Because we use it for Brahman, Brahma, the one of the Trinity. Then there's Brahman in Hindi and Marathi.
Yeah.
So what is that root? Why is it used in all these places mean different things?
Well, the root is same. Briha means vast, infinite. But then there are these different suffixes and prefixes and things that are added by the grammatical rules, and then it makes different meaning. But the root is the same. And therefore Brahman is actually in the neuter gender. Brahman doesn't have gender. Well, Brahma is a masculine, is a male deity. And Brahmana, then there's another one suffix added to it, and then it means one of the 4 social divisions in the country. So that's how so the roots may be one, but then by adding these different stuff to that, the words acquire different meaning. Yeah. Sure, yeah.
Swamiji, but why is that same root used in all the places? Is there a logic to that?
Well, in a way, yes. If it's vast and infinite, it makes sense that, well, I don't know, I'm just kind of now just wildly speculating. Well, Brahma, from whom this entire vast universe comes, that's why he is the creator. And also, the same root comes from Brahmana, means one who studies about this infinite. That's why traditionally they were seen as those who studied the scriptures, taught about this infinite. And in a literal meaning of the term, it's not even about a Brahmin caste. A true Brahmana in the literal meaning is one who has realized Brahman, one who is an enlightened being. So there is a reason. It's not randomly selected. This thing. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So, Swamiji also said that we don't have any proof of rebirth. It's just a theory. But the sages, or Swami Vivekananda, talk about the previous lives that they have experienced. Isn't that proof that, I mean, these enlightened
Again,
people...
the proof depends on you accepting a testimony of somebody else.
At least better than just
Yeah.
it's a theory.
Yeah,
So slightly more, I guess I find it easier to believe that if these people, realized people are saying it, that means that there must be something there.
The idea of rebirth is this. If I accept this birth as real, then to deny rebirth is not logical. The idea is simple. In science we say what makes something a fact or true in science is if there is some phenomenon that is seen or some experiment reaches a certain result. If that experiment is repeatable, someone else can do the same thing at some other point and reach the same result, then you can say it's true or it's real, right? It's a fact. So if it's possible for this birth to occur really, then who can say it can happen only once? So that's the idea. If it can happen once, well, it can happen again. So if I accept this birth as real, and if I want to be logical about it, I have got to accept the possibility of a rebirth. But I have the option to question the reality of this birth itself. Well, if I question the reality of this, then that automatically falls. If there is no birth, then there is no rebirth also. And in fact, one of the Upanishads, called the Mandukya Upanishad, does that, in fact. There is one verse, and Shankaracharya's teacher's teacher, called Gaudapada, wrote a gloss on that Upanishad. And so there is this passage there which says, there is no bondage, there is no freedom, there is no bound soul, there is nothing. In other words, it just denies this bondage itself. And if there is bondage, then there is freedom. If you don't accept bondage, then there is no question of freedom. And so here is this question: is the bondage real? The bondage that we are experiencing now, is that bondage real? And the answer is no. Because if the bondage were real, and there are actually several problems with that. First of all, God is real, or Brahman is real, and then the bondage is real. Well, then you have two realities. And then we say God is infinite, Brahman is infinite. Brahman could not be infinite if there was another competing reality. That reality would limit it. And secondly, in Vedanta, the word real is always understood in the sense of eternal. That which is satya, real, is nitya, is eternal. So if the bondage were real, it would never go away. There is no hope of freedom. So then we say, well, then bondage is not real. Well, if it is not real, then why do you need to strive to be free? Is the freedom real? And the answer is no. To give an example, before going to sleep, if I keep a glass filled with water next to my bed, and then I fall asleep, and in my dream, I'm in deep inside Kalahari desert, dying of thirst. And there is a glass of water just next to my bed. I just need to just stretch out my hand and drink it. I can't. So that glass of water next to my bed is totally useless in the thirst I feel in my dream. So dream thirst, however unreal it might be, cannot be quenched by this real water. On the other hand, in that Kalahari desert, someone might suddenly come and say, oh, I've got this water, drink this. So now my dream thirst can only be quenched by my dream water. Waking water cannot quench dream thirst. Similarly, the bondage, if it is unreal, that ignorance, if it is unreal, cannot be removed by real knowledge. So, if ignorance of myself is unreal, the knowledge of myself is equally unreal. Now, it sounds terrible, but that's how it is. Only, just like dream water can quench dream thirst, unreal knowledge can remove unreal ignorance. Because there is really no freedom, there is no bondage, there is nothing. The reality always is. That's the situation. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Swamiji, you were talking about dream. When we sleep, there is a dream stage, and when this is the waking dream stage. So who is the one who is dreaming?
Every one of us. I am the one who is dreaming. Whoever is seeing the dream is the one dreaming.
So there is someone is still existing.
That someone is me.
And we want to remove this me. We are all trying to remove this me, but still me is existing because we are dreaming?
Yes, good question. It's like this. You see, there are really two me's. It's becoming more complicated, I know. See, when we fall asleep, so let's say, let me speak about myself. So now I have this sense of I, and I go to sleep, and I start dreaming, right? And as I said before, my dream world is being experienced as a whole by me, who is asleep. But there is someone in that dream I identify as myself. So when I say, oh, I went to Starbucks in my dream last night, what really has happened is, in my dream, there is this one person who went to Starbucks. And I've seen that person is me. So now, there is the me of the one who is sleeping and watching the dream, and there is the me of the person who went to Starbucks in my dream. Right? So that is a false me. That me of the person who I see as myself is a false me. While the me who is dreaming, that's the real me. Okay, look at it this way. Imagine, and you really need very powerful imagination for this. Imagine Brahman as that infinite being who falls asleep and starts dreaming. So Brahman is all that exists. There is nobody else. And Brahman has fallen asleep and is dreaming. And Brahman dreams this entire creation with all these galaxies and planets and everything. And then Brahman, who is infinite, looks at this one person in that whole creation and says, that's me. Now, the me that every one of us is experiencing in our own heart, that is really the me of Brahman who is dreaming. So my ignorance is to identify that me with just this body and mind. That's the issue. So if I remember that the sense of I and me that I have now is really of Brahman who is asleep, and seeing this, the problem is solved. But present, this I and me is this I and me. That is ignorance. That makes sense? Yeah.
So now I see, either I'm very confused because now I feel there's a three me, because one Brahman who is witness that someone is dreaming and that someone is wrong, So who is the third one can be witness, because
No, there is no third.
then who is telling Brahman that you are dreaming?
Hmm?
Who is telling Brahman that you are dreaming, you are wrong? Knowledge?
Brahman is telling Brahman. There is nobody else actually.
No hope, Maharaj.
Yeah, it is like that. I mean, think about it this way. If in my dream, let's say I'm dreaming at night, and someone comes and tells me in my dream, hey, this is only a dream, you're not going to believe that person. That person is telling us the truth, that this is the dream. But we are not going to believe it because we don't know a dream to be a dream while we are dreaming. We know it to be a dream only when we wake up. So it's possible for someone to come in my dream and tell me the truth, that it's a dream, and it's possible for me to roll my eyes and say, this is nonsense. Now, all of these Upanishads and the Gita, that's what they are doing. In this dream, all of these books are telling us, this is the dream, this is the dream, this is the dream. And we say, oh yeah, that makes sense, and kind of very intellectually stimulating. And yet, it's so easy to forget it. That's why we need to wake up. So the good thing is that in this cosmic dream, there are these enlightened beings, and there are these books, and there are these great people who are trying to tell us tirelessly, this is the dream, this is a dream, wake up. And we need to believe it. And that's why this Upanishad begins with Shraddha, which entered into Nachiketa thought. If we have Shraddha, even if we have not experienced it, even if we have not realized the truth of it, if there is Shraddha, we will take their words a bit more seriously. We will ponder on them, we'll reflect on them. And if we ponder on them, if you reflect on them, if we do what they ask us to do, there is a chance that we might wake up. That's the idea. Yeah.
Swamiji, when we're having a dream, if we're enjoying the dream, a lot of times it seems, at least I don't want to wake up. Could that be happening in the material world as well, where we enjoy it so much that we don't want to wake up?
Sure. The idea of not being born is not that attractive to many people. It's, oh, all this will end, everything will be one. It's like, no, I'm enjoying life. I don't want everything to be one. So, yeah, sure. Not everyone is thrilled at the idea of everything disappearing. And it can be frightening too. The first time Vivekananda went to Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna was so happy to see such a pure soul there. He was very eager to kind of give him that experience right away. He just goes and just touches him. And because Vivekananda was so pure, that at once that transformed, and he saw everything melting around him. And he just yelled and shouted, what are you doing to me? I've got my parents at home. And then Ramakrishna said, okay. So he recognized he was not ready for it yet. So sometimes the idea might sound intellectually very stimulating, oh, everything is one. But if we are not ready for it, if all the differences start melting away, it's like pulling the rug from under your feet. And it can be frightening. It may not be so. And so therefore, I mean, while many of us who are serious spiritual seekers might want spiritual experiences, we need to pray, first of all, to make our body and mind fit to hold those experiences. Because if we are not ready for those experiences, they might come, and instead of making us happy, we'll be just terrified. It happened to actually, again, in Vivekananda's life, when as a young boy, at the age of maybe 7 or 8 or 9, or a very young age, he used to play with, how innocent their play used to be, not too long ago, maybe a little about 150 years ago. But they were playing at meditation. And so they were all the little children obviously they did all the other naughty stuff also, but sometimes they would just sit and meditate. And Vivekananda, as a young boy, Narendranath, he used to just sit and meditate. No one had taught him how to meditate. He just maybe heard about it or seen some other people do. He would just sit with closed eyes. And then one day, when he was sitting in a room all by himself, suddenly a very holy figure appeared before him, exuding this great inner harmony and peace. And he got frightened. He was terrified. He just ran out of the room. Like, whoa, I thought I was alone in the room, and who is this person? And then it just suddenly struck him. He was very young. He's like, no, that was a vision. Of course, when he came back, everything had vanished. And then later on, he identified. He said that was the first vision, and that was the Buddha. The very first vision he had as a little child of 8 or 9 years old was that of a Buddha. But again, he was not ready for it. And because he was not ready for it, rather than it making him happy, he got frightened. But that can happen also. So we need to kind of first prepare the ground to be able to hold these experiences well. Otherwise, we may not understand them even when they come. That's the idea. Yeah.
Swamiji, is it sufficient to just have faith and love and devotion and not have any of this knowledge or not having studied the Kathopanishad? Is it enough to just have faith and devotion? Or what is the function of this spiritual knowledge?
Well, the idea is that if I have, yes, the answer to your question is yes. So the idea is if I have faith and devotion, then whatever is necessary for my own evolution will come to me. And that's what we call grace. So even if I don't actively go in search of an Upanishad, and it's not necessarily that everyone has to read an Upanishad, but the insights contained in this will come to me in some form through some source. And it can be most unpredictable. We don't know. Because truth is available at all times, and it can come to us in any different form. So all that we need is just to be ready for it. If we prepare the ground, then the truth will come. That's the idea. Yes, yes.
Swamiji, just a comment. I think some Advaitic texts like the Ribu Gita and even a master like Ramana would say that the only difference between the waking dream and the dream we have at sleep is that the waking dream is much, much longer, of a longer duration. That's why it seems so hard to sort of shake away from this ignorance. And I think they would emphasize that Atma Vichara and asking these sort of questions, what is the truth of me, who am I, would be important. Otherwise, Loka Vichara would creep in, the inquire into the world and the non-self.
No, I don't think they would say that. I think longer and shorter are very relative terms. And the time dimension in the dream and the time dimension here, they are not on par with each other. So I might have a certain dream for, say, just a 1 hour at night when I am sleeping. But that 1 hour according to the waking measure, waking time. But in that 1 hour dream, I might be experiencing like 50 years of my life. So 50 years of life being crammed in that 1 hour, it's not going to appear as it's got in a fast forward mode. Those 50 years will, in my dream, will have passed at the same pace that the time moves here. Only when I wake up, I will realize only 1 hour is over. So longer and shorter are very subjective. And I don't think, therefore, that the waking experience is necessarily longer than the dream experience. Yeah.
So, Swamiji, one of the things is life is a teacher, as we say, and sometimes because you learn from life. So how does a spiritual master can help you become conscious, like Vivekananda had Ramakrishna there for him, where how do you recognize that there is somebody who is going to awaken you at some point?
What we have to do is to become the right student. If we are eager to learn, if I want to learn, then knowledge will come to me. in most unexpected ways. It doesn't even need to be a person. Just walk along the river, and the river might teach me something. I look at a tree, and a tree might teach me something. I look at a bird might teach something. In fact, in the Upanishads itself, there are stories about how, in fact, there is this one student who goes to a teacher, and that the teacher says, oh, here are these, take these, a certain number of cows. Maybe, again, I don't remember the exact number, maybe a 90 or 100 or a 10, and says, go and take care of this cattle and come back to me only when the number becomes 1,000. And so this student, well, one of the things was obedience to the teacher. That's the instruction the teacher has given me, to take care of these cattle until their number becomes 10-fold or 100-fold. And so that's going to require months and years. And so the student takes care of the cattle. When the number becomes the number the teacher said, then he returns back. And when he returns, the teacher looks at him. It's a beautiful passage in the Chandogya Upanishad. And the teacher says, just by looking at you, I know you're a knower of Brahman. So really, the only thing the teacher has told him is, go and take care of this cattle. And then there is a story about when he's taking care of the cattle. Again, he looks at the sky, but because of that eagerness to learn and the purity of his heart, which brought about the clarity in his mind, the sky teaches him something. Then he finds a bird flying. The bird teaches him something. Then the tree. So a lot of his teaching really comes from what we see as apparently material, lifeless objects in the world. And he becomes enlightened. So if we are students, if we are eager to learn, life will provide us many different ways of receiving knowledge. And so from our side, that's why Ramakrishna is saying, as long as I live, so long do I learn, is very important. We should not stop becoming students after we graduate from schools. As spiritual seekers, we have something of that student mentality, attitude, positive way should remain with us. So long as I'm eager to learn, knowledge will come. And if I'm not eager to learn, knowledge may be there all around me, and I won't benefit by it at all. That's the idea. Okay, so we stop here today, and when we meet next week, we'll begin with verse number 6. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We'll continue with this study next Wednesday. On Sunday, we have a guest speaker, Jacob Meskin, who is a senior lecturer at Hebrew College in Newton. He will speak on discovering different pathways in Jewish spirituality. It will be a fascinating talk. I would encourage all of you to attend this. On Tuesday and Saturday, our meditation will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.